Hello, everyone, and welcome to Café New Canadians. Café New Canadians is a virtual event series that brings to you interesting topics every week that we discuss with experts. And these are things that are valuable to immigrants, newcomers within Canada. Today's session is the topic, as you can see on your screens, is everything you wanted to know about Canadian resumes and cover letters. So you can rest assured that we will be sharing lots of tips tonight and give you lots of information about how is it that you can perfect your resumes and cover letters, what is it that employers look for in those, and lots of other tips as well. Today's session is brought to you by New Canadians. Now, New Canadians is a TV and web-based show that connects newcomers to valuable information and resources in Canada. We air our episodes on Omni TV. That's weekly, and we also post our content on our website as well as our YouTube channel. So these are the areas where you can find our content. For tonight, I'm your host. I'm Shruti Dargan, and I'm pleased to welcome two amazing guest speakers tonight. We will be joined by Brian Golod, who is also known as the interview sniper. He's an expert when it comes to resumes and job applications, and he's been helping immigrants with resumes that also pass the applicant tracking system, something that's an obstacle that a lot of job seekers face. We are also joined tonight by Kris Johnson. He is the founder and managing director at Epoch Recruiters. He has also been helping a lot of job seekers, and he helps companies hire top talent through an unbiased lens. So of course, he's someone who has a lot of expertise in the field and will be able to tell you the recruiters and the employers' perspective on what is it that they seek. So very warm welcome to both of you.
Thanks so much, Shruti. Appreciate it. Glad to be here. Brian, I'm glad to be with my good friend Brian here. I hope we're going to add some real value for you guys. Just a quick note about myself. So as Shruti said, my name is Kris Johnson. I'm the founder of Epoch Recruiters. I've been in the industry for about 16 years in the recruiting industry. I've worked with multinational firms and now I've branched out on my own. I'm really passionate about seeing people's careers advance. I'm passionate about companies reaching their corporate goals, and that's really the genesis for the name Epoch Recruiters. Is I feel like when people advance their careers, it's an epic moment in their life, and if I can be a part of that, it's really fulfilling for myself.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you, Kris.
Yes, Brian, we'll move to you.
And I am Brian Golod. I've been, as you can tell, I have an accent. I've been in Canada for 16 and a half years. I came here with my parents and my sister from Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I've been in the IT industry for 23 years. And about 2.5 years ago, I discovered that I had these skills to be able to help people get back on their feet and advance in their careers as well. And I've been able to help a lot of candidates with their interviews, with their resumes, with their cover letters, through connections as well, introducing them to people like Kris, for example. And I just take a lot of joy and it feels very meaningful to be able to help people get back on their feet and advance in their careers, especially when they're coming here to a new country and they don't understand the culture. So Kris is someone that is incredibly friendly to work with and super professional, and I am happy to always point you in the right direction or help you in any way.
We're actually very excited to have you both with us tonight, and very certain that this will be a very interesting session for our audience. They'll go back with lots of information. Before we jump into the topic now, I'll just remind the viewers joining us today, whether on Zoom or via YouTube, wherein we're also live streaming this webinar, that we're sure that you'll have lots of questions for our experts. They will be answering them live. So please share those questions on Zoom in the chat section, as you see, and on YouTube as well. Moving into the topic now, resumes and cover letters. Of course, that's something that becomes an everyday activity for an active job seeker. It's also very, very exhausting because, of the multiple things that you hear about resumes and cover letters, applications in general, the need to actually tailor each application for a job, and lots of information that there's a lot of misinformation as well, which kind of goes with it. You can search about it. There's so much information available on Google as well, but then it just becomes a little too overwhelming sometimes. So I guess we'll start with Kris on this. Kris, if you could just first inform our viewers, educate them a little about what exactly differentiates a resume from a cover letter, and what's the main purpose of the two documents?
Sure. So first, to start off, it is a daunting task if you're starting a resume from scratch. Even if you're coming from overseas and you are deciding to reinvent yourself, if you will, it can be very challenging. And so you're going to have a ton of information out there. I think Brian and I are going to provide some information that you may agree with or you may not agree with. One thing you'll learn is there's no right answer for a lot of these things. We're just here to provide a little bit of insight for you that hopefully makes it a little easier for you to get a quality resume and cover letter out to potential employers. So first thing that I think Shruti wants me to answer is, first of all, what is the main difference between the cover letter and the resume? So the resume, if I start there, is at most, in my opinion, a 2-page document, ideally a 1-page document that really summarizes your career to date, all of your key accomplishments, what you yourself as a candidate bring to the table from your professional qualifications. When people use cover letters, the difference there is that you get an opportunity to share your story, bring it to life, and garner interest. It's really a gateway to garner interest in the potential employer or recruiter to have interest in even looking at your resume. We'll probably talk a little bit about whether a cover letter is necessary or not. But again, the main difference is that the cover letter can help you sort of come to life, jump out of the paper, and actually be able to tell a story as to why you align with a specific role. And the idea is to capture the attention of that audience member so that they want to then open up your resume and start scanning through it.
Sure. Thanks for that. Brian, now I'm sure that a lot of people who reach out to you must have confessed that, theoretically, everything that Kris just shared with us sounds easy, but when it comes to actually sitting down with those documents to create one about yourself, it's actually a very daunting task. So how is it what are the different elements that you could break it down into, and your 2 bits on the differences or the similarities between the 2 documents?
Absolutely. So let me say this. With regards to the cover letter, I think that it is the last document that I would have or suggest or advise anyone to work on. The reason is because through speaking to recruiters, hiring managers, and HR people, they've admitted to me that they don't actually want to read them. They actually will read a couple of lines and they will toss them out. They don't actually care to read them. One thing that I would strongly suggest, is to develop relationships with people like Kris, for example. Or an HR manager, or maybe an employee of an organization who can introduce you to the right person, to the decision maker, someone who can vouch for you. If you have someone who can vouch for you, that is way stronger, more impactful, and effective than having the best cover letter written. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is build a relationship with someone who can truly vouch for you and say, I know this person, I know what this person stands for, how professional he or she is, and I'd love for you to sit down with him or her to meet them, right? So with regards to cover letters, I've written some really good ones for candidates who, now one of them is an Indian girl who is working at Microsoft as a contractor. She's doing amazing. They work, but that's because the hiring manager at that particular time was looking for a cover letter, right? But if I were to suggest to you, spend your time writing cover letter after cover letter, I would say, don't spend your time doing that. First, tackle the low-hanging fruit, basically those career opportunities that are out there that are like the easy apply. Though at this moment, I have to say a caveat is we're going through a pandemic and there are thousands of candidates going through the easy apply. So now you're competing against thousands of applicants as well. So going back to my first suggestion is build relationships with people who can actually vouch for you. Now, with regards to the resume, to make it more tangible, the resume needs to be clean in terms of the layout, the ATS, the applicant tracking system. It needs to pass. Basically, who uses an applicant tracking system is an organization that has dozens, hundreds, or thousands of applicants at a given time. They cannot sift through those applications, so they have to make their lives easy. And they need to be able to say, okay, which are the good candidates out there? Good by, it's software that is really trying to figure out who is the right candidate. So the first piece of advice is don't leverage Actually, let me go back. The first piece of advice is if you are looking to immigrate to Canada, understand the culture. Try to make a real effort in trying to understand the culture. So a lot of countries out there in the world, including the one that I came from, they don't do resumes, they do CVs. And a lot of people use the word CV and resume interchangeably. They're not the same thing. CV stands for curriculum vitae, which is basically your life story. So you will see a CV that is maybe 5, 10, 15 pages long. If you come to Canada, look at Kris, he's saying 1 page long, 2 at the max, right? So Canadian employers don't want to see anything beyond 2. I personally get away with 3 pages. I've always had 3. Take a lot of pride in the work that I've done throughout my career. I cannot trim it be anything under than 3, but that's fine. Probably I've left opportunities on the table, but it's worked for me in my career. Now, understand the culture here, right? So some of the items that you need to remove from your resume, your photo, right? So Canada stands for equality, and they want to give the same opportunities to everyone. They don't want to have to look at your photo to decide whether they like you or not. So your photo doesn't belong to your resume. Your ID doesn't belong to your resume. Your whether you have a driver's license doesn't belong to your resume. Your religion, your gender, like all these different things that for someone who can pinpoint to you who you are as what your identity is, whether you're married, have children, and so on, they don't belong to your resume. Those are some tangible ones. Now, with regards to the ATS, don't download or don't borrow a template that is fancy and that it looks beautiful, because that will break the ATS. The ATS is done through a software, and the software cannot be prepared to understand any potential template out there. So your resume needs to be as clean as possible. Basically, remember the old Notepad program on Windows? You will open that. It's almost as close to that as possible. So it's basically a Word document with no lines, with no tables, with nothing fancy. It's just pure text that any software program will be able to digest and process.
Sure. So when it comes to information and achievements, the more you write, the better. But when it comes to formatting, less is definitely more here. At this point, you brought up something very important about the difference in a Canadian resume and something in, say, different countries. What are the key differences? Of course, you've shared a few over here, but is there anything else besides this that prohibits, say, a candidate sitting abroad to apply?
You want to go first, Kris?
For myself, I mean, one thing that I've noticed, but recruiters or hiring authorities, they say, the research shows, will scan between 6 seconds to 30 seconds of your resume. If we think about 6 seconds, by the time I just said this sentence, they've either made a decision to either continue reading your resume or unfortunately put it aside. So piggybacking off what Brian said around spacing out the resume properly, white space is fine, because sometimes you need to have, every role should have a description of the company itself, just 1 or 2 sentences about the organization you work for, your responsibilities, a gap, and then bullet points about what you did specifically at that organization, what you accomplished. And that should be very clean and easy to see. A lot of the resumes, not saying all of them, but many of the ones that I see, I get it. People are coming to this new country. They're excited. They bring a lot of knowledge and wealth to a potential employer. And the resumes are 7 pages long, and they're talking about everything they've ever done. And there's a real art to be able to concisely express what value you bring to the table. So that for me is the more generic, generalist difference I see between resumes that I'm seeing from recent immigrants to maybe somebody who is used to the environment, like Brian said, the cultural differences. One other thing, just a piece of advice, it actually came to me from a colleague of mine who's an HR manager at a startup, and he suggested recently on LinkedIn, if you're working for a large automotive company in Pakistan, it's in your best interest if you could relate that company to the most relevant organization in Canada. So if it's, again, I'm a little bit ignorant on what that might be, but whatever motors it is, it's in your best interest to say the General Motors of Pakistan. If it's a grocery store from the Philippines, a very large groceries chain that you work for, and you were in IT with this grocery chain, you would want to say, this is the grocery store company, similar to Loblaws or Supercenter, something that's going to relate and make that hiring manager or recruiter easily translate that, oh, okay, this candidate is coming from something similar to Shoppers Drug Mart, similar to Loblaws, similar to Walmart, whatever it might be. Now all of a sudden we're comparing apples to apples.
That's a great tip. But when you say this, you mean this with regard to a resume, right? That on the resume, if I say that this is the company that I worked for, this is an equivalent of, say, this other company in Canada.
Precisely, yeah.
Great. I'll stick with you, Kris, on this next question. Let's take an audience question at this point. Siddharth Dasgupta, who's joining us on Zoom, is asking us that, is it possible to get a job in Canada from abroad when you haven't even migrated as yet, immigrated here? And is the ATS also something as a filtering system that varies from country to country?
Okay, I'll tackle this to start with, and then maybe Brian, you can come in here. So the first part of your question about landing a career or a job in Canada from abroad.
Yeah.
So I have, at last count, been responsible, not me personally, but myself or my teams have been responsible for somewhere in the neighborhood of 9,000 placements. I am not aware of one of those 9,000 where the candidate got the job before they've arrived here. That's just the reality. So you may need to massage your story. You may need to really be very clear when you're applying to a position about the timeline you expect to be here, addressing any concerns up front so that I don't make a decision wrongfully or rightfully without knowing all the information. So if you're applying to a role and you let somebody say, I will be landing in Canada, say in end of August, I'm going to be available for interviews from now until August, but letting them know that you have an actual timeline to arrive is a lot better than trying to apply and having a phone number that is a +91, phone number. Again, 6 seconds. It's that easy that a recruiter will just pass off of that. So whatever barriers you need to eliminate to prove that you are here in a way, just like all the other applicants, as Brian said, there are so many applicants out there right now. Do not do not add extra barriers to your possibility of getting a job.
Sure.
As far as the resumes, the ATS systems, again, maybe Brian, you can take that on or elaborate on what I was saying.
Absolutely. So with regards to what Kris just said, I only experienced one case of someone who was offered an opportunity while being in South America, in Brazil. Typically, even before the pandemic, organizations are not incentivized to hire someone from abroad, right? They don't understand the process. They don't want to get involved with the process. They don't understand the legality. The Canadian government is amazing in the sense that they protect the jobs, the careers of the people who are currently in Canada, who are residents or citizens of this amazing country. And if organizations were able to just hire anyone from abroad, it would be bad for people here in Canada, right? They have to respect the rights of the people here living here in Canada. So my advice, and I've been very public and open about this on LinkedIn, is I've been saying to people, please don't waste your time applying to career opportunities in Canada if you don't have the paperwork, because the chances are that you're not going to get anywhere. No one is going to even interview you. You're just wasting your time that you could have. It doesn't matter how quick Easy Apply is. All those seconds that you're applying on Easy Apply, you could have spent them towards something else more productive. So my advice is go through the proper channels and try to land here in Canada through a work open permit, through an express entry or a provincial nominee program, or study, work and stay program, whichever program it is that you think is right for you, but be eligible to work first. And then you will be competing on the same ground as everybody else. Otherwise, it's basically you are in the basement and everybody else is on the first floor, right? Yeah. And with regards to the resume, I've had the exact same success rate, both in Canada, the US, the UK, where else? Australia, with regards to passing the ATS. The ATS can be configured to pick up on anything that is important to the organization that is leveraging that ATS. It can be configured to a set of different rules. Basically, what you have to do at the end is match the job description that is out there with your resume. And there are a ton of different services out there in the market. Some of them might be free or might give you a few tries for free, and some of them might be paid services. But basically, before you apply anywhere, the best service that you can do to yourself is take your resume, ATS compliant resume, take the job description, the core aspect of that job description, and match them and see what that software that you trusted to analyze your resume says. That typically those software will give you a match rate, but they will also tell you what it is that you need to fix, right? So by submitting it blindly and just shooting in the dark, you're doing a disservice to yourself. So the best thing that you can do is just trust one of the software that everybody trusts, and then see what you need to address. The best thing that you can do is do this enough times so that you start to bring up your match rate. And then after maybe 4, 5, 10 times, you will not have to do anything else. And you will always be on the 95 percentile, and you will always be submitting. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be chosen or brought into an interview, but your rate will be significantly higher.
Yeah, I'd just like to add,
Sure.
you know, the resume is an organic document. It should be changing with every application that you put your resume forward with. So to Brian's point, just want to be very clear here. If you look at a specific job description and you look under the must-haves or the requirements for the role, there's going to be key phrases that are probably unique to that organization at times. You want to do everything you can to make sure that those words not only just appear sporadically in your resume, but in the responsibilities of your employment history, because ATS can actually parse your experience. And if you have these keywords just in a summary at the top of your resume, you're not going to score as high as if you have them recurring throughout all of your experiences. So again, look at the top 2 to 3 to 4 bullet points of what the employer is looking for as a requirement, and try to match up almost verbatim those exact words somewhere in your resume.
Excellent advice.
Sure. And of course, let's take a few more audience questions. You can see on your screens as well, to all others joining us, that you can post your questions on the Q&A tab here and on YouTube in the chat section. The next question here is about, again, ATS. You mentioned that, you know, there are a couple of softwares that allow one to be able to match how much profile, how much your resume is matching the requirements of posting. I'm aware of one such software, which is called JobScan. The question is, could you recommend other softwares to test ATS? Is there anything else that the two of you would like to share over here?
That's the one that I trust as well. So the website is not .com, it's .co. So jobscan.co. I would suggest anyone to take a look at that one. You don't have to sign up to use it. You can take a few tries. And if you want something tangible to take out of this webinar is, if you don't know about incognito mode on your browser, whenever you go to a website, go on incognito mode, you can use that website. You can take the 2 or 3 tries that they give you, right? And you do the matches, and you keep on improving your resume with every single upload of your resume. Close that browser, go to incognito mode, and do it again and again and again. And that way you don't have to subscribe. Now, when you subscribe, you do have extra features that you will be getting, some extra advice from the software. But if you want to do it for free and you cannot afford the $80 or $90 every 3 months that they charge, just do it that way and you will be getting the same service.
A few other tips, just,
Sure.
yeah, sorry, go ahead. There's software like we're talking about that can help, you know, evaluate the score of what, you know, your resume will achieve in an ATS. But some real basic things, just to make sure, you know, that you heard it the first time. Brian mentioned eliminating all tables. Any sort of table that has an outline of your skills, but it's in a, you know, Excel formatted table, is likely to get trapped and it's not going to convert properly. use a simple font, Times New Roman, Helvetica. I mean, don't use anything that looks like script. Keep it very simple. It's also pleasing to the eye that way and easy to read through. But ATS sometimes doesn't track those things. Even something as simple as your bullet points. Use the standard circle or square bullet point. No diamonds or check marks or shapes, because again, it could fall into the trap and not convert properly.
Excellent advice.
I was actually about to come to that. Sorry, Brian, please go
ahead. Great advice. And since he mentioned about the bullet points, yes. Do not be afraid of changing the actual indentation, the ruler where that bullet point starts. So as you know, when you hit the bullet points, it's going to eat up a little bit of space on the left. And typically there's a big gap between the bullet point and the actual starting of the sentence. You can play without affecting the ATS. So you can bring the bullet point all the way to the left so that it is aligned with everything else. And you can bring the first character a little bit closer to the left as well, so that you have more room to play with. The reason why you want to consider doing this is because people nowadays, not just hiring managers, but people in general, we don't have attention span. So if you can get used to the idea of writing bullet points that are just one single line, right? Just keep it at one single line. It's going to be a lot easier to digest for the person reading your resume. The other thing is, and this is just, it's not necessarily ATS, but it speaks about your document creation and how much pride you take in the way that you write a document. Whenever you go through the fold from one page onto the other, make sure that you don't go, let's say that you had 10 bullet points. Don't write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the bottom of the previous page and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on the top of the next one. Try to make the entire experience part of the same page. So whenever you start a brand new page, start with a brand new experience that you had.
Yes.
Okay. And then lastly, the bullet points, make them very tangible. Kris was mentioning before about almost verbatim in terms of what the organization is looking for, but of course you will have to share more about your accomplishments and what you've been able to deliver. Make them tangible, right? Start them with a very strong word. They're words that you really want to start any bullet point with. And there are a lot of people who I've seen try to fluff I don't know what the word is, but they basically add these adjectives at the beginning of these bullet points to make it sound a lot more appealing. The truth is, as a hiring manager, that repels me. I don't want to see that. If you are already sharing that bullet point on your resume, it means that you're proud of it, that you were successful at it. Otherwise, you would not have included it. So for you to say, for example, successfully delivered, of course you were successful. Otherwise, you would have not it in your resume, right? So cut to the chase, I guess, and just go straight to the point of what you did and make it tangible. So if you delivered something, delivered this in X number of days, or impacted number of people, or generated X amount of revenue, make it really tangible so that someone can say, oh, wow, this candidate has made a real impact on that organization.
Both of you actually shared some great tips about the formatting and the way. Just a quick answer on what is an ideal font size when it comes to resumes. Some places say 10, 10.5, 11. Is there any thoughts on that you have?
Don't go less than 10. That's all I can tell you. I actually just had a conversation with one of my recruiters today. We were scanning through resumes, and he specifically said, like, he's going to gouge his eyes out if he has to look at an 8-font resume again. So I get it. That's just someone trying to squeeze more information into the resume. Sure. You got to make it pleasing. I know there's only so much real estate on a piece of paper, but again, having spacing 10 or 11 is perfect in my opinion. Anything smaller or larger, you're going to get questions, and you want to jump out to the employer as being unique or different that you can offer, but you don't want to eliminate yourself just based on something so silly as the size of the font. So stick with that default 10 or 11 font.
I use 11 and it works great.
Yeah.
And here's one more mistake that I see a lot of people make, which is with regards to the timeframes, the dates when you work in a certain organization. A lot of people just include the year. And we've all heard about employment gaps, right? So if you've had a gap throughout your career, I mean, you try to reduce that gap or somehow hide the gap. But when you're saying that you work from here from 2017 to 2018 and the next opportunity you've had it from 2018 to 2019, question is which months, right? Like you were not there the entire year. So be very specific about when you did what so that it doesn't raise any red flags, so that people don't have to question anything unnecessary. And if you had a gap, be okay to talk about it, right? If you had to look after a relative, if you were laid off, whatever the case might have been, as long as you can speak about it, own it, then that's great. It's not a big deal.
Please.
Yeah. So I know that Brian and I are both very passionate about the power of LinkedIn and how that can help you. It's your personal brand. Just also make sure when you start to put those months in there that it aligns, your resume aligns with what's on LinkedIn. Because I know for a fact that recruiters, if they go past the 6 seconds looking at your resume, okay, great. We're on to the next step, which is let's compare what's on the resume and see if they have a LinkedIn profile. They're doing it. Everybody's doing that. So if I have seen candidates get tossed aside, I have tossed profiles to the no pile because I'm not going to take too much time. If I see the months haven't aligned or the job titles are different than what's on your LinkedIn profile compared to your resume, I'm on to the next candidate. So do your best. It's your personal passport to get an interview. Make sure it aligns with your personal brand that's on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned the word that I was going for, sorry, Shruti.
No, this is great that you guys are weighing in on each other.
You said the word that I was going for, passport. So I've seen a lot of LinkedIn profiles and even resumes as well with a photo that is your passport photo, right? And I've seen some terrible passport photos on LinkedIn profiles. So take a lot of ownership of that photo as well. Make it inviting, welcoming. Make sure that you own that profile. It's basically someone coming to see you, and you want to be there with a smile. You want that photo to be clear, to be crisp. You want to be dressed accordingly. I've seen a lot of people who are dressed as they would be in their jobs, right? If they're in the oil and gas industry, for example, in, let's say, Saudi Arabia, wherever, they are dressed that way. Maybe that works in that industry. I am actually not sure with regards to that. But typically, someone who comes to your LinkedIn profile, they want to see your face, right? It's basically, that's all you have to show. You don't have to show anything else. You don't have to be in action, twisting a pipe. You don't have to do that. It's just your face. So all your attire really doesn't matter. You just need to look professional. That's all.
One quick point about the formatting, and then I'd like to move to a point that Brian raised. So what about margins? Brian, you talked about indentation when it comes to bullet points. Word, of course, allows us to, move around the margins as well. But would you recommend that one sticks to a regular format, or can one go wide or narrow with the margins as well?
Stick to a regular format. And the reason why is because if anybody ever prints your resume, there are printers that will not print outside the margin areas. So already you are going to alienate whoever the reader of that resume is. You're going to be missing out, right? It's just not going to make sense. But on top of this, I want to say, please, whenever you actually submit a resume, unless it's specified that it needs to be in Word format, submit it in PDF. The reason is, whenever you submit a PDF, it doesn't matter the operating system, the mobile device, it doesn't matter how the person receives it. The PDF will render the exact same way. So if you ever export that document and send it to someone, and there's also one more reason which I will address in 1 second, but whenever you share your resume with anyone, send it in PDF unless the job description is stating that it needs to be submitted in Word document. The second reason is you don't want anyone to be tampering with your resume. You don't want anyone to inject something or to remove something from your resume. You want to have all the opportunity to shine through whatever merit you've had. You don't want someone to just take you out of that list, right? Because they said, oh, you know what? I have a friend who can actually do better. Let me remove a few of these points. You want to have the opportunity that you deserve. So protect your resume by exporting it as PDF and submitting it in that format. And the file name. Make sure that the file name is clean. The first thing that anyone will ever see is the file name of the resume. Even before you jump into the resume, is the actual file name. I've had candidates who submitted their resume with different names on the file name and the inside name at the top of the resume. I'm like, okay, you definitely took this template from someone else, but you could have actually spent the time changing your name. So what should the file name look for a resume? Is your first name. If you use a middle initial, sure, add it. Your last name, the word resume.pdf. A lot of people got into the habit of adding underscores. For those of us who are maybe over 30, we grew up with maybe Windows 3.11, Windows 95, Windows 98, and there were files that we had to add an underscore. Now you don't have to put an underscore anymore. These operating systems can handle underscores, special characters, and you name it, right? So don't make it more difficult to read than it should be. It should be your name, resume.pdf or .docx.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that information that you've shared. I'm sure that, all of this combined, there's no document on Google that would list all of these. So it's wonderful to have this information. Let's move to a point that, Brian, you raised. And this is with respect to a lot of barriers that, specifically job seekers who are newcomers and immigrants face. For instance, if you are, and some of these questions, some of the points that I'm about to raise have been asked in the Q&A section over here as well. The point that you raised was about, if there are job gaps. Now, I'll just list a few of those barriers, whether there's a job gap, whether one is an immigrant, whether or not they are overqualified or underqualified for a job. A lot of these things, do you list this? Like, for instance, if I'm a newcomer to Canada, should I, now that I'm here, should I talk about it within my resume that I'm an immigrant, I was earlier in this country, this is the experience I have? Because a lot of sites actually recommend for you to conceal that information. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I would disagree with anything that has to do with concealing or lying, or I don't even know how to describe it.
Even if it isn't lying, I'm sorry, but even if it isn't lying, for instance, just not mentioning that. Not to say that, one would try and create a different identity about themselves, but is it an information that's all right to be just dropped very casually from your application?
This is what I would say. As an immigrant, the first responsibility that you have is to fit into this society that you've chosen as your new home. A lot of people, a lot of new immigrants, they don't want to take something lower than they were used to in their home countries, because they are like, no, I mean, I've had an amazing career. I should not go down from my position that I had before. I'm going to find something like that. And then a lot of things happen with this. First, you start to have a gap, right? Because especially now, let's talk about reality. The pandemic, let's say we are going to start to have a lot of immigrants arrive, or maybe they're already here watching us. The pandemic is here with us. There are millions of people unemployed, right? So to think that they are going to choose you tomorrow, I mean, you're probably going to bang your head against the wall. So if you can find the career opportunity, someone who trusts you, who thinks that you're going to do well, and you have nothing else on the table, you need to start to build that confidence that you need and make sure that that gap doesn't exist, okay? What someone in your ideal organization for your ideal role is looking for is to see that you've come to Canada, that you did whatever it took to be able to get back on your feet, to immerse yourself in this society, and to demonstrate that you actually have what it takes to be able to do well. So the first piece of advice is for anyone coming here is just recognize that maybe the same position that you had before, you're going to have it, okay? This is an amazing country. There's no discrimination as far as I know or ever experienced. And as you can tell, I have an accent. I've done amazingly well. I don't think that you will ever experience that. So come in with a mindset that you might have to take something as a stepping stone before you get back to where you were before. Maybe you don't have to. And I've had Indian friends who came from India and they went straight to KPMG and they've been doing amazingly well. So that can actually happen. But while you are searching for opportunities, understand that if there is something that comes to you, if you have nothing better, just take it and then build yourself up from there. because you have to provide to yourself, you have to provide potentially to your families, you have to minimize that gap, and you have to have the confidence to be able to move on to the next opportunity. So, and the last thing about Canada, the culture is, in my eyes and my family's eyes, Canada stands for respect. So respect means that you're not misleading someone, you're not concealing information, you are not lying to them. So this country stands for respect. You don't want to raise any red flags. You want to be upfront. You want to be trustworthy, and you want to really be who you say you are. So if you've had a gap, if you've had something happen to you, as long as you can speak to it, it would be amazing. And in my experience, hiring managers, the best ones at least, the ones that you really want to work for, because let's face it, you don't want to just work for anybody. If you have a career, you want to work for someone who will really empower you, right? And inspire you to come to work, to help you do well, develop professionally, personally, and so on. You want to work for that person who will understand that you're an immigrant, that I mean, what you've gone through, and give you that opportunity. And whether you have a gap or not, it's just irrelevant. It's just a detail. So own it, whatever you've gone through, and just speak to it. And that's what matters. And the last point is, the resume will not get you the career opportunity. When you go to that interview, it's not the resume that will actually help you secure that opportunity. It's you, your personality, how you express yourself, how you communicate with someone else, whether you show them that that they can trust you with a role, with a responsibility that they need you to take on. So,
Kris, would you want to weigh on the point about being underqualified or overqualified? Actually, overqualified. Bukola and Juliet, both of whom have been joining us here on Zoom, they've raised these points about someone who possibly has a huge gap in their resume, say as big as 10 years, but they're now back on the job, looking for jobs. And for somebody else who is overqualified, are they also considered for positions because they've mostly met with other outcomes?
I just want to make sure I understand the question. So essentially, I want to answer if a candidate is overqualified, their experiences are overqualified for the role that they're applying for. And so yeah, you should still apply. I think you again, this is where your resume, you may be a finance manager in your previous life, and now you're, based on what's going on, you just have to go feed your family. So you're interviewing for financial analyst roles. You never want to manipulate anything that's going to seem untrue, especially if there's background checks that are going to validate that you were in fact a finance manager. But you want to still align your responsibilities to what the job is asking for, the job that you're applying for. And if it is a cover letter that you're including, or it's an email that you're including, you're addressing the fact that you're acknowledging that you're coming with extra experience. You're facing that head on. You're not, if you address it head on yourself early on in the process, now the defense is, if somebody tells me that, I'm going to say, oh no, that's okay, let's have a conversation. If I try to hide it in a way and hopefully let it slide through, then I'm going to be left to make my own decisions and think, they're going to leave after a month of being here because they're overqualified. So if you address it, you're more likely to sort of lower my defense mechanism and say, yeah, you know what, this is the reason why this candidate is interested in the role. That makes sense to me. Unfortunately, yes, this is the position they're in, and here's the reasons why they're willing to do all the work. Yes, let's have a chat. So there's that. With the gap, I know I don't want to harp too much on this, but there's not too many great things that have happened because of COVID at all. We know that. But one of the great things that's happened is that it allows you to explain any gap. Everyone's going to have gaps these days. So now it's made it so much more of a common thread for you to say, to be transparent and explain why you have a gap in certain areas. Feel free to fill in that gap with learnings or courses you've taken, hopefully. If not, maybe there's some volunteering work you've done. All of those things can at least show that you've been trying to do something to better yourself or to better the community around you.
I'll say one thing to that point, if you don't mind, Kris. With regards to the gap, the question will be what you've done during that time to deliver value to anyone. We understand that a lot of you might be unemployed. what is it that you've done since March, when we've all throughout the world have faced this, to get back on your feet or to potentially help someone else across the nation, across the world? What is it that you've done to upskill yourself, maybe? What have you done throughout this time, right? If you can demonstrate that you've done something for yourself and that you were not just watching Outlander on Netflix in 3 days, the entire season, that probably you are going to, you are going to captivate the attention of someone who is looking to trust you with the responsibilities of their organization, right? To succeed there. So I've always been saying on LinkedIn, we have the opportunity to help somebody else, empower, inspire, do something for somebody else, organize webinars. We've been going through a lot of these crises, right? We have the pandemic, we have the Black Lives Matter. And I think that a lot of us can identify ourselves with the Black Lives Matter because of, we're immigrants. We are coming with accents, with different skin colors. So whether Black Lives Matter touches us directly because we're Black or not, it doesn't matter. We need to speak and do something. So if there was a hiring manager asked me, what have you done? Why do you have this gap? Or what have you done throughout this pandemic? I could say, I organized a webinar for Black people only, where I could listen to them and I could provide some support. I've empowered people across the world where I help them with their resumes and their interview skills. I've set up a new business for someone who I knew how to help. All these different things, whether they are related to you or not, if you can demonstrate that you're constantly looking for ways to deliver value, it will show you as a proactive member of society. And that's what a hiring manager is looking for, most likely.
You both actually brought up some really important points about discrimination as well and the challenges that have come up because of COVID. These were a few concerns that were raised in the Q&A section over here as well. One quick thing about when we were discussing those tips for what makes a resume ATS compliant, what about links? If I worked at a company, maybe it's not really known in Canada, or even if it is, if I wish to direct people to the website, would you recommend, both of you, that one should include links to their own LinkedIn profiles, to the different company pages within the resume?
I've had success with both. If you go on Google and you look for ATS, you will find a lot of articles that suggest to remove the links. So lately I've removed links from the resumes, but I've had success with links as well. So I'm torn between them. If I have to abide by the advice that I was providing earlier about keeping it clean, I would say remove it. Keep it clean. Just text, no links.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I would say include your in your contact information, your phone number, your email, and your LinkedIn link to your profile.
With one caveat.
Yeah.
Include your LinkedIn URL only if it's going to make you look good. If it's not going to make you look good, or if you have no activity, if you have no engagement, if there's nothing to be found on your LinkedIn profile, then there's no point. Like, you're just directing someone to a place where there's nothing. So my advice is start to invest in your LinkedIn profile, start to engage, start to actually leverage LinkedIn. I am an unofficial ambassador of LinkedIn. I absolutely love it. It's been amazing to me. I've leveraged it to find 4 career opportunities. I've been able to double or triple my salary thanks to LinkedIn. It's been unbelievable to me. Professional, personal, and financial growth. So my advice is become active, engage with people, build relationships. If you were to find someone like Kris, Kris and I, we didn't know each other. We met through LinkedIn. We've done things together. We've benefited together. We've helped and empowered candidates together. He's made money, income, revenue for his organization, and I've made revenue for my organization through empowering someone else or some other people. So these are relationships that happen on LinkedIn as well. So if you can find a way to build a relationship with someone casually, professionally, typically it starts casually and then it turns into something else. Build trust. And then if you get Kris to like you, Kris might say, hey, by the way, what do you actually do? Like, can I help you in any way, right? The reason, just so that everybody knows, when Shruti asked me who we could bring here, I suggested Kris because of what he stands for. Because I've met him in person. I know what he stands for. I know that how much he cares for candidates. He doesn't take any shortcuts. He doesn't cut any corners. So, and this is someone that just maybe a year ago, he was alien to me. I didn't know Kris. So we spent the time getting to know each other. And I'm sure that if I ever wanted to find my way back into corporate, now I'm fully dedicated to LinkedIn. If I wanted to do this, I could go to Kris and say, hey, Kris, do you know of any opportunities? And he would actually take me seriously. So, yeah.
Kris, I mean, you've also been highlighting the importance of LinkedIn over and over again. Is that something that you think helps with, of course, that helps with networking? Does that also help with the aspect of getting into or being able to tap into the hidden job market? That's also something that's big in Canada. And from what I understand, it's important to network with people, have the right connections so that they're able to inform you about certain positions which are available or which are vacant.
Yeah, so the short answer is absolutely yes. To Brian's point, I mean, you could have another topic on this for another hour around how we wanted to give some tips on how to format your resume properly for ATS, but also just to garner attention. The resume is not going to get you your job. It's just going to get you to the next step, which is visibility and hopefully a phone interview. That's all that goal is. You are going to get the job based on what you bring to the table, your energy, all your beautiful experiences, and you're able to tell a story of why you're a fit for the organization. That's what's going to get you the job. The resume alone won't do it. So I had a chuckle. I said, yeah, put your LinkedIn profile. And Brian's absolutely right. If your LinkedIn profile is not good, then don't put it on there. But there's no reason it shouldn't be good. Every time you apply to a role, you should be looking on LinkedIn for somebody in that organization, ideally somebody in the hiring authority for that role. You message them on LinkedIn, you let them know that you applied. You don't message them and say, find me a job, here's my resume. You offer some value. And that could be anything from, I noticed your values online on your company, what you stand for. That's why I applied, is I like your purpose. I like where your company's going. Something as simple as that is a lot better than just approaching me or employers and saying, here's my resume, help me get a job. So there's a whole art form to networking properly, and it's giving, being reciprocal, giving before you ask for something. And it can be small things, but you start to grow your network on LinkedIn. You are going to have credibility in the marketplace. You're going to offer your insight from things that you did back home in previous roles. You're going to offer insight as to how to solve problems for people. And before you know it, you're going to start to grow your network of relevant people in the area. And when an organization is just considering a new role, or they keep seeing your name commenting on various posts from their employees, and they're giving it a thumbs up because you're really resonating with them, that's where they start to tap you on the shoulder and ask you to come in for an interview versus you applying. So there's definitely a huge hidden job market out there. And the way you tap into it is being relevant, being consistent on LinkedIn, and inviting people to connect with you, but offering value back to them, not asking them to do something for you without them knowing who you are.
Definitely. And there also, some great tips that you shared about ATS, about LinkedIn so far. I know that, Brian, we spoke about sharing an ATS template that you, of course, have. That's a link. That's something we want to inform our viewers today, that's a link that has been picked up by some great organizations. His template has had huge success. And the link to that, where you can download it from, we will be sharing that in a communication post this webinar with you. I'm so sorry. We were planning to actually open it and take people through it as well, but I've been through the sections and I know it's self-explanatory. It's quite easy for people to be able to use. Of course, you've raised some great points over here. We still have a few minutes where we could touch upon a few more audience questions here. One part over here is about, Brian, someone is asking you over here that it's how can newcomers get in touch with you? Somebody over here, they have named themselves, they've been trying to reach you. How is it that newcomers can reach out to you for your help?
So on LinkedIn, I've maxed out my number of connections. So I have 30,000 connections, but because of this, I turned my LinkedIn profile into a premium profile, and I set it to open profile so anyone can message me for free. You don't have to spend any email credits. You don't have to spend any money to get in touch with me. You can send me a private message, If you ever want to connect with me, you truly want to connect with me, send me a personalized invite. And this is some advice that I will give you to connect with anyone. Don't just pick the lazy way and just submit a connection request. People will have no idea what it is that you want from them, right? A lot of people don't have this open policy where they accept everyone. Clearly, if I have 30,000 connections, it's not because I know them, but because a lot of people want to know me. So I accepted everyone, but not everybody introduces themselves. So the best advice that I can give you is whenever you reach out to someone, introduce yourself. And don't just say hi. A lot of people just say hi. So say hi, address people by their names, spell their names correctly, which is something that even to me doesn't happen. My name is not that difficult, right, Brian? But whether it is because of autocorrect or because people are not that detail oriented, people misspell my name. People's identities are the most important thing that they have, right? So write people's names correctly. And if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, you can do it for sure. The advice that I have is make the most of LinkedIn. If you ever see a hiring manager, if you see an HR person for an organization where you think you would excel at, make sure that you start to see all the activity of what that person is doing. Go to that person's profile, click on all activity, click on posts, see what they are liking, what they are sharing, and start to engage with every single one of those posts. Don't become a stalker, right? But start to slowly become noticeable, right? Make sure that that person starts to know or notice who you are. You might not get that opportunity that they have right there and then, but you will start to do that with maybe 50 to 100 different people. Something will come from it. So invest yourself into building yourself up on LinkedIn. That's the best advice that I can give you. A lot of people are going to start to make recommendations based on it. And the last thing, with regards to culture, it's so important that you start to speak. And again, I have an accent, so maybe I get away with this and I can say it. Speak with the same language that people are expecting you to speak here in Canada. The first thing that I want to say to everyone, whether you are employed, unemployed, back in your home country or here landed in Canada, is you're choosing the absolute best country in the world. I have absolutely no doubt about it. I knew it before the pandemic. Throughout the pandemic, it's been amazing what the leadership here in this country, the government, has done. And this is the reason why this country has not the same culture as our countries, as our neighbors down south. Corporate America is not the same as corporate Canada, and Canada is not the same as the US, right? We stand for different things. Our values are different. We treat people differently. This is an amazing, amazing country that you've chosen. My advice is start to learn about this culture, what we stand for, and make sure that you stand for that as well. Bring the best values from your home countries and adopt the best values from here, from Canada, and speak with the actual language. And by that, I mean the actual words that we say. A lot of people, for example, from India, they say email ID. In Canada, we don't say email ID. If you want someone to understand you, you have to speak to them with their language, right? You have to communicate in a way that they can understand you. For me, email ID means nothing. Email address might mean something. When a lot of people from India say the same, the word or the phrase the same, it means nothing to me. But then I learned that it actually means it, right? So speak with the language, with the vocabulary that people are looking for. And whenever you communicate with someone, make sure that you elevate your language, your vocabulary. You're not looking for a job, you're looking for a career opportunity. If someone is asking you, puts you on the spot, why do you want this job? Put them back in their place and say, this is not a job for me, this is a career opportunity. And I believe that I can bring all this value, blah, 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 blah. Speak with the actual vocabulary that will demonstrate that you're a professional.
Definitely. Thank you for all the tips. I know that, there's so much more that I personally also want to bring up over here, but it's just unfortunately for the lack of time. Before we end, definitely I'll come back to Kris. One quick question to you, which is about how is it that, of course, you have a recruiting firm of your own. And as a recruiter, could you just weigh in on how is it that a recruiting firm can help immigrants and newcomers get closer to their job prospects?
Okay, yeah, I want to be clear here. So first thing is understanding who the client is when you're working with an agency. So the client for the agency is the company that's paying them to find the person. So can you go in with the expectation of working with a recruiter and they're going to find you a job? No, that's not how the service works. But Does it allow you to go into their database, interview with them, practice your language, have an interview with them so they can take down some key attributes about you. And when roles, and you follow up with that agency, you put it in your calendar, I'm going to follow up every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever interval you think is appropriate. And you start to build value with that recruiter at that company. And you do this with a few different agencies out there. All of a sudden, when a role does come up, you're first of mind to them. So it's a long play for the most part. If they have a role that's open, specific to your skill set, you have a much more likely chance. But you should still be proactive, search the marketplace, look at LinkedIn, look at those recruiters that seem to have, first of all, that they're trustworthy, that they value relationships and your experience, but don't go in with the expectation that their job is to find you a career opportunity, I should say. Go into it with, this recruiter can help expose my profile to many employers. I am going to interview properly. I'm going to follow up and be top of mind and use them as a networking person, just like you would connect with somebody on LinkedIn.
And for anyone, based on what Kris said earlier about giving before you receive, before you ask for something. What I stand for is give, give, give. And when you think that you're done giving, give again. Let's take that, and for any candidates out there who are struggling, money might be of an essence right now, it might be scarce, but if you can make an impact and get someone's attention, right? Kris might be overwhelmed with a lot of roles out there that he's trying to fill for an organization. What I would suggest is get creative. Send Kris, who loves Starbucks, send him a gift card. Try to get him on Zoom and say, hey, I want to send you a digital gift card so that Kris can actually grab a Starbucks coffee and he can get on a Zoom, he can spend the time with you, get to know you, and do that with Kris and with John and with Mary and with Shruti and with Gerard, and do it with as many recruiters as you can in your industry. And you will start to build your name and people will get to know you, what you stand for, how you speak, how you communicate. You will not be a piece of paper anymore. You will not be just a LinkedIn profile anymore. You will be someone who actually stood out. You did something different. Be creative. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Kris, one final piece of advice from you as well, and then we'll wrap the session.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to point out, Shruti, I'm hoping we get all these questions. Brian and I, every single question that hasn't been answered, we will gladly answer over the next day or two. So please know that we will get back to that. In fact, I am looking at one from a very relevant one. Shabnam has just asked about changing names, and because sometimes it can be very difficult to pronounce. I just wanted to highlight, maybe Mr. LinkedIn Ambassador will mention it, but there's a new feature on your LinkedIn profile where you can actually use your own voice to describe how you pronounce your name, so that as a recruiter, I can click on that, hear you say your own name. So when we engage in a dialogue, to Brian's point earlier, nothing's sweeter than the sound of your own name. I mean, it's who you are. So you have an opportunity now to go into your profile, record your voice as to how you say your name, and your relationship with anybody that you're networking with just starts off that much more intimate. As far as advice out there, it is a tough time. There's no doubt about it. Everybody's feeling it in some way or another. The word of the day, the word of the month is resiliency, and don't give up. The next conversation you have might be the one that ends up, changing your career path, years down the road. The conversation after that might be the one that you find the job that's going to at least cover the bills between now and the end of the year until you can really find a really good career opportunity. So just to Brian's point about give, when you've made 5 introductions and 6 introductions and the day's almost over, send a few more. Just do a little bit extra. We all have, that's going to separate you from some of the other folks out there that are in the same boat. So wish you all the best. I want to connect with anybody who's interested in connecting. Brian's the same way. And any way we can help, we absolutely will try.
Thank you to both of you once again for wonderful insights that you've shared with us today. You both assured the viewers that we will be answering all the questions that were left out. And it's been wonderful having you on the platform with us today. On the screen soon, the viewers will be able to see information about both Kris and Brian. how is it that you can reach out to them. We will also be sharing the ATS resume template and answers to the questions that we have mentioned over here. We will be sharing that in our following communication. As part of Café New Canadians, some of our regulars know that we organize sessions every week. We've got a bunch of interesting topics lined up for you. Another session next week, of course, I'll shortly tell you about it. But before that, New Canadians is exactly what brings Café New Canadians to you. And we'd love to connect with you. On your screens, you can see that we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Telegram as well. So join us over there, connect with us, tag us in your journey over here, and it'll be lovely to look forward to your experiences within Canada. Another way that you can receive our content is to subscribe to our newsletter. That gives you content every month right in your inbox. And of course, the next session that we have lined up for you is will be on your screen very, very shortly. And before you log out, I would request for you to just take a minute to answer a survey that we will be sharing with you. And that survey will help us understand better as to what are your requirements, what are your expectations that we can meet better. Thank you so much to all of you who've joined us. And it's been lovely having everyone over.